The TBS special presentation, next.
This is going to be one of the best shows ever.
Welcome to the TBS special presentation. Tonight, Gaia and William work to create a heaven on Earth. William Shatner and Faye Dunaway as the voice of Mother Earth in the dramatic conclusion of Voice of the Planet. The TBS special presentation.
Hit escape. I did. Nothing happened.
Gaia. Tangbushe.
A computer hacker has broken into the system.
I know that phrase.
Damn. It may sound crazy, but that hacker haunted me. Always leaving the same signature. Gaia. On my computer at home, even in my dreams. Seducing me to Nepal. I left a cozy academic position at Caltech for what? A Buddhist monastery at the foot of Mount Everest? A funky, argumentative computer.
Look, I know about your book, your frustrations. You'll need my help. Trust me. Come here. I want to show you something.
How did I get here? Who wrote your programs?
Someone's controlling you. Answer me, Gaia. What's going on?
All species feel the inner harmony of Earth. Your species goes on to describe those feelings, to create art, to dream, to seek the distant horizon. I recognize that yearning, the little child in all of you, through the looking glass of time. This home planet of yours is a paradise, William. Heaven on Earth. Yet, human beings have come perilously close to hell. Ironic, isn't it? Yours is the one species which grapples with that ambiguity. Every human culture has its own enchanting mythology pertaining to paradise. It was on Mount Sinai that Moses and the Israelites received the watchwords of their faith. And for 1,500 years, Christian ascetics have prayed beneath this mountain, living out their lives at St. Catherine's Monastery. These holy men have equated the Sinai with paradise on earth. The monks flocked to this austere desert to be unencumbered and closer to heaven.
More likely, closer to hell.
For centuries, the monks have kept the ghastly skulls of their revered brethren as a reminder of their spiritual transcendence from this painful earth.
Don't be such a pessimist. The monks love this earth. They climb Mount Sinai regularly, delighting in the fresh air and beautiful expanse. That beauty is at the heart of their faith.
I'm sorry, but Western civilization has not focused on the fresh air of paradise, but rather on the expulsion from all that was ever considered beautiful and essential. Humanity was said to have sinned. There was no turning back from the shadows of evil. Your earthly paradise was perceived as mere drudgery. Even here in Nepal, the Buddhist monks have set their sights upon the otherworldly tonic of nirvana.
William, why do you suppose that the monks, devoted to peace and tranquility as they are, have chosen one of the most beautiful places on earth to do Buddha's spiritual bidding?
That's simple. They were born here, in this part of the world.
It's more than that. The spiritual traditions of the Far East have long nurtured an extraordinary belief in paradise on earth.
But in India, for example, where Buddhism began, the Buddhist model for paradise has not had much holding power. The land is terribly impoverished and vastly overpopulated.
You're wrong. Within the chaos of modern India, there exists one truly viable example of human paradise that has been worked out over thousands of years according to principles of art. The goal of nonviolence and a pure love of nature. An ancient religion, the forerunner of Buddhism, has become a modern success story.
Some mystical cult, I suppose.
Try the oldest religion in Asia, Jainism, embraced today by over 7 million adherents.
We now return to Voice of the Planet, starring William Shatner.
The Jains have sustained a single vision that unifies all souls on earth. Their guiding principle is called Ahimsa, which translates as nonviolence. The philosophy of Ahimsa is perhaps the most nonviolent system of action and belief ever advocated by any human society. For months, you have asked me for antidotes to human woe, William. Jainism is one human solution. It has worked for the Jains. It could work for your whole species, for the entire Earth.
That's interesting. Keep talking.
This remarkable provocation was first conveyed thousands of years ago by Jain sages, whose images were carved in the sculptured caves of Ellora. Since then, they have stared across these sacred caverns toward the light of day, the light of hope. Human beings have a brain. You have a conscience. You have to choose peace or violence. The Jains have made that choice. They made it for themselves. They made it for all animal life. Cows may be sacred in India, but most of them die terrible deaths, wandering the streets unfed until they simply perish. But in shelters like these, found in every Jain community, the animals are cared for, loved, fed. Stray animals are taken in. Children adore them. This is the beginning of Ahimsa.
Caring for cows is not the paradise I had in mind.
Ahimsa goes beyond treatment of cows, William. Jains abstain from the wearing of silk garments. They fashion their elegant clothing from synthetics and cotton so as to avoid harming silkworms, which are normally boiled to death to make silk. And this revulsion of pain or destruction can be observed in the Jain diet. All Jains are vegetarian, though they do eat milk products. They refrain from keeping any pets, harnessing cattle, or imposing their will on any living creature. They even try to protect microorganisms.
Is that why they're wearing masks?
That's right. In the same way, some Jain monks and nuns protect insects from getting into their mouths and being killed. The Jains believe that every organism on Earth has a soul, capable of attaining spiritual salvation, paradise. And thus the Jains vigorously protect every organism.
That's fine for wounded camels, silkworms, and microorganisms. What about the starving masses?
To serve the poor, the homeless, and the sick, the Jains have started free hospitals all over India. And they have provided the largest proportion of charitable donations and social welfare in the whole country. The Jains have made incredible wealth, despite the fact that they have limited themselves to professions that are non-violent and non-impactful on the environment. Jain monks walk all over India, spreading this message of Ahimsa. One sect of Jain monks, known as the Digambara, has taken the precepts of Ahimsa to the ultimate. They have essentially returned to a pure state of nature, no clothes. These two monks have been walking for decades from village to village, spreading the message of peace. On this day, they've come into a remote village in central India.
I wouldn't want to contemplate what would happen to those guys if they walked into Manhattan looking like that.
I wouldn't predict anything about Manhattan, but here, the local people will take it as a great honor to feed them. A monk will never take food for himself. To do so in a world where others go hungry would be considered selfish. These monks believe they will live forever. Why? Because they have never killed. They have never eaten an animal. Their souls are pure.
If they're vegetarian, then they've eaten Wouldn't that also be considered violent?
Jainism is a prudent and empathetic form of behavior, well suited to feeling, thinking beings. Ahimsa means nonviolence, but it would be unnecessarily destructive to starve to death, so they make their choice. They have chosen plants over animals.
It's a beautiful philosophy, but you can't expect the majority of human beings to be nonviolent. In fact, I suspect you'd have to force peace down our throats. There are many who would go down screaming.
The British left India screaming, but they left. Gandhi himself followed the precepts of Jainism. He wrote, "If love or nonviolence be not the law of our being, the whole of my argument falls to pieces."
And did it not fall to pieces? Did not hundreds of thousands of Hindus and Muslims massacre each other at India's partition?
They did indeed, but Gandhi adhered to Ahimsa, even up to the time of his assassination. Gandhi understood the problems. Still, he could write, "Our nonviolence is as yet a mixed affair. It limps. Nevertheless, it is the only way." Jain artisans have enshrined this vision of Ahimsa in magnificent marble temples all over India. Pilgrims have been coming to such places as Palitana for over 1,000 years, paying tribute to the same ideal that inspired Gandhi. These delicate carvings, chiseled with infinite care from solid marble, reflect one of the most gentle and loving perspectives I have ever witnessed among your species.
Art is one thing, but what about our modern dilemmas? How does this esoteric Jain vision of paradise relate to a contemporary Westerner?
William, Jain art depicts stories, events, and issues that are relevant in every century and reflect the very basis of Ahimsa. Jains believe that abortion is the lesser of two evils when a mother does not want to have a child. They also agree upon the principles of euthanasia, the mercy killing of animals, and the wisdom of self-defense as a last resort. But they forbid capital punishment. The Jain monks have been teaching this message to each generation for thousands of years. The message works. Ahimsa is perpetuated. At any time in your history, half of you are engaged in war. If you must fight, then fight with non-violence, as Gandhi did. There is no other way. In their simple insistence on survival, the Jains have affirmed love in a world of violence. They have fostered their own utopia within India. I would like to believe that there is a little bit of the Jain in every human being. For the Chinese Taoist sage, nature means paradise. Human beings possess the key to that perfect place. You have only to open the door. For the Chinese, that doorway is known as Qing Shan Wei Qing Tzu, the place where the river and the mountain meet. I sit leaning against the cliff while the years go by and the red dust settles on my head. And the men of the world thinking me dead, come with offerings of wine and fruit to lay by my corpse. This poetic sentiment is the essence of Chinese oneness with nature.
Like the Christian obsession with an afterlife, this vision seems laden not with happiness, but with melancholy.
You misunderstand me. That poem comes from the writings of Han Shan, a late 8th century Chinese Zen poet who haunted the rocky forests south of Shanghai. Those forests and waterfalls, like all of China, were considered to be sacred space by the Zen Buddhists. Following the works of Han Shan, in the 12th and 13th centuries, China witnessed an aesthetic revolution, prompted by a simple, if paradoxical, belief that paradise exists here and now. A profusion of miniature worlds abound, biological compulsion translated into the painter's brush, hypnotic, leading you higher and higher.
What's higher and higher? What are we looking for?
You're looking for the essence, which the Taoists discovered in the palm of their hands, in every blade of grass, the unity of life.
Your disk drive runneth over.
It does indeed. With good and evil, art and heresy, I've seen it happen time and time again.
What have you seen, Gaia?
Poignant insight toppled in the stampede of aggressive impulse. A wink, a grimace, and then another wink.
Paradise lost. And paradise regained.
Catchy titles that about sum up the history of Japan. Those visions of Han Shan and his contemporary painters were translated into the rituals of paradise.
Voice of the Planet continues with Faye Dunaway as the voice of Mother Earth.
June, 1483, early Edo period. It was a terrible time for this country. Despite the seeming peace of these calm forests and pools, mossy inclines and tranquil sand gardens, the surrounding city of Kyoto was embroiled in conflict. Several miles down the road, there was fighting going on. People were dying over causes later to be forgotten. Not here, however. Look around. Some of the most perfect landscapes and matching interiors in the whole world. Here is striking evidence that human beings have learned to live simply, with little separating them from the surrounding paradise. The symbolic recreation of a mystical purity reflects that paradise in an austere sand garden. The 8th Japanese shogun, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, retired to this haven, which is called Ginkakuji. The shogun was uninterested in his administrative duties. A shy man in his late 40s, artist, connoisseur, he renounced politics, dedicating his life to art, for which posterity owes him a profound debt. He alone would pass on a legacy of aesthetic cultivation after all the war embers had gone out. Two samurai warriors have come to take tea with their shogun's tea master. The shogun is their true lord. They express their admiration for his gardens. But it is the all-important tea ceremony that has brought them here this day. Their swords must be left outside before they stoop humbly to enter the tea hut. In an era when the samurai keeps his sword on his person at all times, from the age of 14, even during lovemaking, this one ceremonial instance of separation from the cutting edge of steel is really quite something, a clue to human nature. The shogun's tea master, Murata Shuku, prepares the heavenly beverage. Every detail of the ceremony is prescribed with poetic, historical precedent. The graceful scoops of powdered green tea leaf, the method by which he'll whisk it into a froth, the type of bamboo implements, the earthenware quality of the tea bowl, the civility is all arranged according to the precepts of an approach to nature that is uniquely Japanese. You see, the tea ceremony is conceived as a way to establish purity between souls. To realign the heart and the senses with the absolute magic and tranquility of the outdoors. This is why I'm fond of the Orient. The Togudo, or tea hut, refers to a very ancient place, William. Buddha's paradise, right here, right now. You see?
I see an elitist indulgence that is removed from reality.
Don't be cynical.
Your blindness to my species' darker side is quite extraordinary. Don't you realize that after their hour or two of tranquility, they're back out training for warfare? With a standing army of nearly 2 million medieval samurai, compared with England's army of 30,000 at the time, it's hard to ignore that Japan was for many centuries the fiercest, most war-hungry of nations. Several 100,000 people were killed by the sword. Many of them beheaded. In fact, the Japanese word osho meant both priest and spear teacher. Zen Buddhism itself cultivated the sword. Zen priests were the masters of forging and tempering sword blades. Monasteries literally conducted warfare. With numerous religious orders competing for favors from the shogun, a competitive edge was deemed mandatory. And that edge was steel. Monks and samurai steeped on the non-violence of Buddhism massacred each other. Bushido, the way of the warrior, was actually part of the same philosophy that inspired the tea ceremony.
We all walk on the roof of hell, gazing at the flowers. That's an ancient Japanese poet voicing a contradiction inherent to such cultural schizophrenia. War in the one hand, peace in the other. And it was peace that ultimately marked the artistic character of Zen Buddhism.
The sword itself contradicts that sentiment. The swordsman says, if we take away the blade of the sword, thinking that it's wrong to kill, the sword will lose its dignity. That's why it looks as if it is always ready to kill. It is from this appearance that the sword derives its mysteriousness. Of course, the Japanese sword's main function is to be of use as a weapon. Gaia, don't you see how easily such art turns to destruction?
You forget, William, that for 2 centuries, from 1638 to the mid-1850s, the Japanese renounced all weapons.
The cycle of aggression seems to be inevitable, Gaia.
William, your species is capable of both brute force and gentle restraint. It's up to you to decide which it will be, heaven or hell.
Turn to Voice of the Planet, starring William Shatner.
When searching for heaven, never for hell. On his 3rd voyage, Christopher Columbus sought a mythical paradise which he believed to exist somewhere near Japan or China or India. Columbus accomplished great deeds because he was certain that heaven existed here on Earth. The beautiful Indian tribes he met convinced Columbus that he had indeed linked up with the original inhabitants of the biblical paradise.
Gaia, Indians throughout South America would be oppressed and many of them killed by those Spaniards who followed Columbus. Throughout the United States, a similar genocide of the native population would recur.
Such contradictions in human nature are maybe for the best, William.
That's stupid. We're talking tragedy here. The 18th and 19th century Europeans began to actually revere the noble savage while at the same time destroying him and destroying the wilderness in which he lived.
Are all professors so inclined to take the dim view?
I'm a realist.
Realist. My word, you are a cynic. Without friction, William, there is no creativity, no shadows, no art. Your greatest visionaries thrived on a wilderness that was destined to be altered and interpreted, not destroyed.
But so much of the American wilderness has been destroyed. The world of the Hudson River School of Paintings has essentially vanished. Walden Pond is no longer in the world of nature, and Yosemite is no longer an Indian word.
I empathize with your fears, but William, in the last 200 years of American history, an inspired tradition has grown up that will surely outlive all of the native tragedy. That legendary pond, beside which Henry David Thoreau wrote his memorable book, Walden, is still a lovely lake, despite your protests. Quiet in wintertime, commemorated by your species for what it represents. And even if the land they painted looks different today, the artists of the Hudson River School travel throughout this country, revealing its true native splendor. Each stroke of the painter's brush harbored the intimations of a divine presence. These painters had the courage to undress the world. Such art stoked the public's awareness of the environment, which led to the very science of ecology. That concern for nature began with a newfound appreciation of its phenomenal beauty.
Yeah, but all this beauty may have too high a toll.
We know the miraculous vision that brought painters, poets, and tourists to this sacred valley below. Painters like Bierstadt and writers like John Muir. This harmony of light and water and the vertical molded our consciousness, brought the East to the West. This spectacle became our spectacle. There was a price. This same vision of Yosemite and of the West was sold to the masses, transformed into an incitement which invites the multitudes to crowd every last inch of the American landscape. I guess that's one of the sad truths about democracy. With democracy, the way of life of the American Indian essentially disappeared. Animal species disappeared. The vast wilderness that had been America was transformed into regulated zones called parks.
William, beneath America's back-to-nature craze is an underlying emotion that speaks for itself. Do you not feel it?
I feel frustration.
I've taken you to a small outcropping in New England. Go to the top. That's it. Keep climbing. It was from such a vantage point in the 1880s and early 1890s that America's premier impressionist painter, George Inness, discovered something profoundly exciting beyond his romantic predecessors. George Inness. You see?
What about Inness?
He brought a whole nation to a higher sensibility. His vision of the natural world was detailed in a common meadow. The stance of a cow, a coming storm, or a simple tree. he made a religion out of light. His paintings did not perform tricks or rouse the awe characteristic of mere grandeur. It was his destiny to discover the inner soul of nature. That discovery was significant, William. It reflected a new degree of sensitivity. The love that stirred in us embodied a new expression coming from American culture.
You celebrate George Inness, but can you ignore America's other great impressionist genius, Ralph Blakelock, a man who spent the last 18 years of his life trapped in a sanitarium in New York State, delirious with pain, rage, lost in oblivion. He too painted light, not the pastoral tranquility of an Inness, but the forlorn vision of a nation bent on raping the land. I read into Blakelock's paintings a tragic development in American culture, which you seem unwilling to acknowledge.
You're being melodramatic.
I don't think so. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote that the focus of Americans was fixed upon one thing: the march across these wilds, the draining of swamps, turning the course of rivers, peopling of solitudes, and the subduing of nature. In 1900, the first automobile entered Yosemite Valley. By 1920, over 1 million cars had arrived on the dirt road leading to this sanctuary. In that same year, the last of the Yosemite Indians would disappear forever. The pendulum swings, Gaia, from paradise to nightmare.
Give in to it, William. The swing of the pendulum is your destiny. Like the tea ceremony, which endures beyond the former ruins of Japan, this valley and the human psyche that has celebrated and painted it lives on. These walls of granite are imperturbable. These waterfalls everlasting, in spite of all the human folly. Open your heart to the miracles around you, William. Open your heart to me. Let down your defenses. It's time.
The Planet continues with Faye Dunaway as the voice of Mother Earth.
Why are you doing this to me?
You're bursting with love for me, and you can't let it out.
I'm feeling strange.
There's a good reason.
What is it?
The whole world contains the reason.
Please, tell me.
Paradise is a given. The earth, William, is perfect. Every day.
I love it. I love it. God, I can't get my fill of it.
William, come to me. I have something for you. Nearly a year ago, you first stroked the prayer wheels attached to a computer. Now I want you to come closer.
What?
Yes. The earth itself is filled with contradictions. I feel all those pains. Pains of acceptance, like the sweet perpetual pangs of childbirth. You came from paradise, and you will return there if only you work it out. Talk to each other. Be good to each other. Own up to your feelings.
What if I'm beginning to have feelings for you?
It's about time, William. You could spend your entire life following clues of an ancient treasure map, searching for some distant golden rainbow, simple happiness, the waters of immortality. But in reality, you only search for that which you have already discovered. Feelings that already abound inside your heart. You were born in heaven. You will die in heaven. And that place is Earth, William. There is no other.
I was in love with Gaia, with Earth, ready to project her message of peace and harmony out into the furthest reaches of the cosmos. But she had a different...
It's been nearly a year since I first arrived here at Tangushe Monastery, a fortress of religious thought nestled amid the towering Himalayan peaks. I have always felt a profound attraction for such high places. The sight of mountain climbers ascending an icy ridge above the clouds fills me with a kind of spiritual awe. I imagine that near intoxication of feeling must be shared by the monks who've spent their lives here beneath Everest, the uppermost point on Earth. In fact, Buddhist prayer affirms humanity's ability to soar in body as well as spirit to such lofty summits. Even to reach for the heavens, for the very stars. I guess I've always wished upon those stars. You might call it my own private religion or madness.
William, your fascination with the starry firmament comes as no surprise to me. There is a method to such so-called madness. After all, yours is the only species on Earth with an eye that is anatomically capable of actually focusing on the stars.
What an interesting coincidence.
It's no coincidence. The human eye, like the brain, has a long evolution behind it, which reflects life's increasing tendency to reach outwards. But those endeavors are fraught with danger. 500 million years ago, the first brain evolved in a fish. That brain would eventually inspire a daring evolutionary move from the water up onto the land. And thus the emergence of reptiles into the fresh air and sunlight. Mammalian evolution produced an even more advanced brain and a lifestyle that reached higher and higher into the forest canopies.
That's me.
You are such a brave species, scrambling ever higher, risking your life, obsessed with heights.
I'm no Evel Knievel. But as a kid, I had a treehouse.
I used to climb everything I could get my hands on, including houses. I used to enjoy scaring the daylights out of my folks. I'd jump off the garage, out of windows. I'd try to fly. It was a nutty passion. But you can't deduce anything about my species from the rambunctious adventures of one child.
William, such adventures seem to be the very story of your kind. You are dreamers. You have forever sought distant horizons, mountain tops, other stars and planets. There's a critical lesson to be learned here.
And liftoff.
I guess we are dreamers. It's what we do best.
William, for better or worse, your brain is addicted to these higher callings. But it's on Earth that such stirrings really belong.
I would wager that it is our destiny as an evolving organism to explore space, to colonize other planets, even to spread the gift of life elsewhere in the universe. Johnny Appleseeds of the cosmos, if you will.
Be careful. You are never completely untethered from the Earth. This planet is your true home. Earth is your destiny. But I fear, William, I fear that your species has ignored that message. Your history is riddled with delusion. Ancient Sumerians, for example, mistook the cosmos for a great mountain. They believed that if they could climb it, it would make them immortal. For them, the message of the stars was cloaked in the language of conquest. The Egyptians built political pathways to the stars. The pyramids were looked upon as clever links to the galaxies, and the pharaohs as divine recipients of powers inherent to the universe. For the first Christians, the stars, one bright star in particular, invoked a yearning for some far-off heaven, rather than for this beloved Earth.
The Planet continues with Faye Dunaway as the voice of Mother Earth.
That's it, huh?
Such PowerPoints as these cliffs, this river, are considered holy to the Indian. Mystical links between our species and other beings elsewhere in the universe. The Chumash Indians recognize a number of astronomical events. To them, the heavens contained cosmic beings imbued with supernatural powers. The Indians would greet the winter and summer solstice, thus participating in the mysterious rhythm of the cosmos. These Anasazi homes, high on the cliffs, were not constructed fancifully, but out of a deep sense of cultural homage to the stars.
Dream on.
Who's dreaming? Look for yourself. A world of crowded mortar, hanging in space. The home to the Anasazi Indians 900 years ago. More recently, the Navajo inhabited the cool cave recesses. But this lost world was more than mere cave dwellings.
This whole valley was fashioned into a spiritual planetarium. The Navajo star panels, painted in charcoal, scattered inaccessibly up there. I feel the allure of this medieval worship. Islands in the sky, like an aboriginal space station. For the Chumash, the shaman was known as a sun priest. That priest was called Alchuklash. But it didn't matter which tribe he called his own. His passion for star travel represented an inner conviction basic to all humanity. His chant was that of the cosmos. Up there, the Navajo shaman priests performed rituals to mark the seasons according to data deciphered among stars. The galaxies had another unexpected impact on these people. The very shape of constellations contributed to the architecture, art, and ecology of these enigmatic cliff dwellers. Cosmic winds bring messages from other worlds. The spirits, attuned to those winds, still haunt this sanctuary.
Where are those so-called spirits now?
They move quietly, leading offerings beneath the 800-foot cliffs, among the punchi cactus, the gamma grass, the pinyon and squaw bush. Stargazers whose footprints mysteriously ascend the impossible cliffs, silently linking the ancient Indians to the firmament.
Beware, William. Don't you recognize disaster? The ancient Anasazi Indians disappeared without a trace.
I wonder what such civilizations had in mind.
You know what they were. Their rituals, their obsessions. But they were wiped out. Can't you see it?
I see ruins. I hear the sighs of a vanished world.
That's right.
What happened here?
Your species was not cut out to live on a cliff, William, any more than it is equipped to live a natural life cooped up inside a space station. You cannot forsake the Earth's green pastures any more than you can forsake your own biology.
Сейчас открыл остекление скафандра, и видно его лицо. И потом зайдет Муса, закроют крышку люку и начнут слезование. Сейчас послушаем, что говорит Владимир Титов. Так, ну что, приступайте к входу.
In the perpetual birth and death of stars, the detonation of entire galaxies, there is little patience for biology. All living organisms must therefore stick together. Only the Earth has the patience to nurture and care for you. Do you follow?
No.
You must get it right.
Gaia, get what right?
William, quickly. There's little time.
What do you mean, there's little time?
The rose.
Yes, the rose. Less cryptic, please.
Little Rose, did you like your drinks? A little more?
Do you recognize her?
She could be my grandmother.
It's not who she is, but what she is.
The convulsions of a galaxy can result in the fragile convolutions of a rose. You've said it to me many times.
I can't protect you from yourself. Now you've got to get it right. Earth, William, is your true biological connection. Don't lose it.
Why do I detect fear in your voice?
I'm afraid that your species is overstepping its natural boundaries. These scientists collecting plants in the tropics of Venezuela are tampering with secrets beyond their ken, William.
What are you talking about?
They are members of an expedition that makes me nervous. The group calls itself Biosphere 2, and it hopes to achieve insight into the wondrous workings of the Earth. Fair enough, but there is an ulterior motive here. To export organisms, whole ecosystems, to another planet where it's cold and hostile. They would ignore your one true home, Earth.
Yes, I'm familiar with the project. They're bold, and they're also inspired.
I'm not so sure. These men and women have radiated out to every continent, hoping to gather representatives from nearly 4,000 species of plant and animal. For what purpose? The recreation of life in a zero-gravity test tube. Specifically, these men and women hope to take these and many other plants and organisms that they've captured up into space to get them to start reproducing on Mars or the Moon or upon some cold and lifeless asteroid. They want to leave Earth and colonize some other planet. It will never work.
It could work. Why be so fatalistic? This is a great experiment. The propagation of life in outer space. Even something as simple as a blade of grass.
You think it's simple, do you?
Gaia, these scientists reflect a challenge my whole species has embraced. They are part of a great mission. A human impulse that has been evolving for millennia. Ever since the ancients began revering the stars.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
We've already begun to carry out an inner directive. A quest that is inherent to our brain, to our biology, perhaps even crucial to the future of life in the universe.
T-minus 20 seconds. 18,
We are
17,
preparing to take
16,
a fantastic
15,
voyage into space.
14, 13, 12, 10.
It's the dawning of a new age, Gaia.
We have main engine start and liftoff.
Not far from the ancient Indian cliff dwellings we visited earlier, scientists are engaged in a noble experiment. These first structures will soon be replaced by permanent glass and steel compounds. 8 researchers are preparing to seal themselves off inside this test tube Earth for 2 years. They hope to demonstrate that Biosphere 2, a miniature clone of Earth, can function as a viable habitat in outer space. To truly mimic the diversified Earth, they are exploring a model that will allow for multiple ecosystems under one roof. That means they need cliffs, desert, tropics, an ocean, a rainforest, savanna, saltwater and freshwater marshes. They must take into account the many intricate and subtle nuances of plant and animal behavior. And they must monitor the potential ramifications of keeping such organisms alive in a closed environment. They'll make careful selections of cultivars for various small-scale agricultural intercropping and recycling systems.
What pH is the soil?
The pH of the soil here is probably about 7. It's a little high, so we're going to start dressing with ammonium sulfate.
Good.
Controlling the pH of the soil is only the first challenge. They'll have an even harder time containing their own wastes. By my calculations, the Biosphere 2 environment will contain approximately 6,000 times more biomass proportionate to size than that of the Earth. Gas accumulation will be enormous. The Earth has 200 million square miles across which to disperse such gases. But this biome is a mere 2.5 acres. That leaves no room for error.
Well, in any space colony, a source of protein would be essential. I mean, it's a lot easier to bring a chicken into space than a cow.
That's fine, William. But whether hens will be able to produce a steady supply of eggs under conditions of prolonged zero or artificial gravity is yet to be determined. Similar questions regarding adaptability have been raised with respect to goats. Both Nubian and Pygmy produce the same amount of milk. However, they have different diets. Their habits and weight also vary. Differences which might seem trivial to scientists, but which would be dangerously important inside a space station.
Gaia, these researchers perceive nothing as trivial. Not even microorganisms and algae, like spirulina, whose cultivation they're trying to perfect in order to assure the production of yet other crops. One of the most important of those crops is corn.
William, corn is complex. Achieving the highest yielding variety in a small and vulnerable crop community is fraught with potential disaster.
They are working the problems out, even down to the organic fertilizers. Certain legumes, for example, fix nitrogen in the soil, thus enhancing the matrix of nutrients for other plant species. These scientists are choosing which beans will be grown.
But it's all a house of cards, William. Earthly life forms will have great difficulties withstanding high radiation in space, not to mention the constant meteorite showers, certain to destroy the glass housing. But perhaps your scientists know something I don't know.
This one's going to be great for the hummingbird.
Oh, it's going to be fantastic. Yeah. We're going to get a lot of nectar out of this. And what we're doing is we're counting flowers now, so we'll know how much nectar will be available.
If they plan on stocking the biome with even a single pair of hummingbirds, they'd better be prepared to include at least 3,000 blooming flowers every day. That's what it will take. The soil and the light are going to have to be precisely configured.
We want to figure out when the plant is at its peak of flowering and is not likely to have any more flowers on it than in the present. Okay. So we'll use that as a signal that our flower count will be at its ultimate. And then we can multiply flower count times nectar and get how much food there'll be for the hummingbird from this.
Okay, so we have to open up fruit.
Yeah, just look to see whether the ovary is beginning to swell or not. Now, normally, if the style remains attached, see how this style is remaining attached?
Yeah.
That's a pretty good signal. You're not going to get an abortion, which means we've had effective pollination.
The volatile organics were high yesterday. I want to see what they're at now. It's these two peaks they've never seen before.
Anything interesting?
Well, they're in fairly high concentrations, so they're, we definitely need to find out what they are, and then we may need to do a toxicology study on these two if it turns out something we might have in biosphere 2. I'm not sure if they're coming from the structure or from the life in the test module.
Or perhaps some interaction of the plant microbial species with the structural elements.
That's definitely possible. Plants have been known to take compounds from the atmosphere and break them down, as well as soil organisms.
The problems escalate the minute you have soil and water. On Earth, no problem. But if you tried for one instant to assume the role of nature, taking over control of basic biology, you'd be dead in your tracks.
We're not trying to take over nature.
You can't manufacture 4.5 billion years of biological experience with less than 4,000 species yanked together from all the continents. That's going to cause big problems.
Well, I don't think that we will have a billy goat in biosphere 2, no, because we can do artificial insemination. Mm-hmm. We can store the semen, and that way we won't have to feed the billy goat, you know, for the whole year.
Unlike goats, the plants will need continuous care. Scientists have already experimented to a limited extent with plants and insects up in space, and they've reaffirmed that any ecosystem will require insects for pollination, for recycling nutrients back into the soil, and for converting organic debris into energy.
A test tube environment cannot foster the kind of natural wilderness that would support humanity.
Well, that's an auspicious beginning, if you ask me.
If you should pull this experiment off, how do you plan to make it work in the zero gravity of space?
The Soviets have been sending plants and animals into space for 30 years. Long-term space habitation has become something of a Soviet specialty. One cosmonaut has spent 326 days on the Mir space station. The Soviets intend to use the Mir, which means peace, and has already been in operation for many years, as a sort of roadside inn on the way to Mars. They expect to begin colonizing Mars by the year 2005. In the meantime, Soviet scientists are rapidly amassing new data that will serve mankind's odyssey to the stars.
The program of biosatellites began in 1973. Since then, the USSR launched 8 biosatellites that carried various animals and plants. We flew over 20 representatives of the animal and plant world. That is why we can term the biosatellites Noah's Ark. As you probably know, over 200 manned space missions have been made. Many of these were long-term flights whose duration has been steadily increasing.
You see, Gaia, the human organism is evolving. We're getting stronger, more adaptable. There's nothing to stop us from exploring space.
We can see that humans and other biological organisms can well adapt to their life or existence in zero-G, microgravity. If these young people up in space don't think about coming back to Earth, they can very well stay in orbit for another 2 or 3 or 4 years, or as long as they wish. But of course, this will lead to important changes in their body, not only in function, but in structure. They will no longer be men of Earth, but men of space.
According to the Soviet calculations, embryos should develop unimpeded by zero gravity. Weightlessness should have little or no effect on fundamental biological processes at the cellular level.
But it does. It caused the death of newly fertilized eggs on a recent Columbia mission.
We know Earth's environment is most adequate for human beings. We do not know today how far we can get away from this reference. We have to understand that the longer man is to live beyond his normal environment, the stricter the requirements.
Most people, most cosmonauts and astronauts in space are feeling almost at home, probably because every moment they would see the planet, they would be in touch with the planet. And at the same time, there is a communication. They can talk to their relatives, to their friends. At the same time, we have to be studying the potential of eventual big colonies in space. The colonies which could accommodate hundreds of people. I think in the next century, by maybe 2050, we would have to do with such colonies. And I'm sure we would have a long list of extremely important things to be done on such colonies.
William, on paper, these grand assumptions and equations all balance out. Until something goes wrong. Your technology is not your most flattering accomplishment to date. Much of it has been developed for destructive purposes, like Star Wars. Your efforts to fly have been largely the product of military expenditures and research. Furthermore, you are mere children at the beginning of your evolution. But the real problems are biological, and they begin to escalate after a few months in space, even assuming an effective artificial gravity.
But the Soviets have proven that long-term habitation in space is quite viable. You've heard the evidence. What's your problem with it?
Let's suppose, for the sake of argument, that you get all this tinker toy technology out beyond your home planet. Fine. You spend your days engaged in endless repairs. The plumbing, the TV monitor's out, the computer's down. You can't sleep, so you're downing sleeping pills and they're upsetting your stomach. Your muscles are starting to atrophy. Your belly's distended. Your calves are demineralizing. The atmospheric pressure is giving you migraines. And you're thinking you just heard your heart skip a beat. In between the bouts of violent diarrhea, you and your comrades are producing ½ a liter a day of volatile intestinal gas, which is accumulating unhappily inside your sealed modules. And you're praying that those seals hold. You've reached your destination in space, where you're content to look out on a barren, hideous, dead surface.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. That's one small step for man, one
Each day, you waltz around the surface doing very important things, very important indeed, in the name of America, Russia, or some private corporation. Oh, it's beautiful up there, don't you think? With all those free rocks, all that free sand, and 60 rem solar flares irradiating you and your friends every day. But in the end, it's sheer boredom that gets to you. Nostalgia for Earth. For everything that is Earth. Moral, spiritual, visceral, transcendent Earth. All of these hazards call into question the very logic of ever leaving Earth.
I've never known you to let a simple thing like logic stand in your way.
Quite right. Because life is expressly illogical, random, a miracle.
Voice of the Planet, starring William Shatner.
Remember? Mud that had been carried by the glaciers and by millions of years of weathering. Mud which harbored an inner world of clay crystals from which the earliest life forms were bred. Those life forms were unique to this planet and to the forces responsible for evolution. Mist and water, oxygen and soil, dense minerals. These pieces of a puzzle came alive. The hot streams produced primitive unicellular organisms. New and colorful organisms, growing up happily in the 160-degree waters. Later, multicellular organisms adopted a remarkable strategy: sex. The only sex in the entire universe. And with sex, other creatures grew up in the mellow paradise of Earth, William. An explosion of Earth-born creatures. In the 70-degree mellow waters of the Earth's coral reefs, tens of thousands of species emerged in every conceivable color and shape, swarming the seas and creating the possibilities for even more advanced evolution. Their bodies were capable of metabolism, thought, action. Evolution conferred caring, intelligence, love. Qualities that reflect a unique planet, one that is endowed with unprecedented beauty and opportunity. As many as 50 million species. An Earth that is alive, thinking, feeling. Just look at it. Nestled Deep within that veil of azure blue atmosphere, atop a few inches of fertile umber soil, you, William. In the heart of a galaxy more accustomed to turmoil, you are a living, breathing miracle with a wonderful destiny in store for you. An exclusive destiny on Earth. If only you are mature enough to see it. Whereas the environment you're setting yourself up for in space is crude, technologically totalitarian, utterly controlled on pain of death.
It's a beginning. We're learning.
And liftoff. Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
One simple O-ring breaks down, and it's all over. How could you entrust life to such a contraption? The distance to other stars presents nearly incomprehensible challenges to your biology.
The Planet continues with Faye Dunaway as the voice of Mother Earth.
You know, William, the life force on this planet shines brighter than any star. There is only one Earth, which is where you can always find me.
What?
You and I are one. If you open your heart to that possibility, we will always be together.
What are you saying?
I've relished every minute of our time together, William. And now I'm leaving you.
What are you doing?
I'm saying goodbye.
You can't.
William, take care of yourself, will you? And remember, there is a still, small voice within every organism that cries out for love.
Please, stop. Gaia, please stop. I'm afraid.
I love you, William Hope Planter. I will always love you, and your children and their children. I could count the ways. For as many thousands of years as you and your kind inhabit this earth, be good to one another.
Gaia, wait. Wait, Gaia.
Will I ever see you again?
Will I ever see you again? Once she was gone, I felt abandoned and vulnerable. Something in me was lost.
Namaste.
Namaste.
The Bible says, "Look to the hills, from whence cometh thy strength, and ye shall rise up above green pastures." I've never climbed the mountains surrounding Tambouché Monastery, but now I felt compelled to do so, to go higher than I'd ever gone before.
What have I done? Gaia. Gaia.
The young Sherpa saved my life. She knows these mountains better than anyone. In that girl's eyes, I recognized Gaia.
The Earth has a message for you. Read it in Voice of the Planet by Michael Tobias, a novel of radical ecology from Phantom Spectra, available wherever paperbacks are sold.